Hello everyone, welcome to Data Science Simple. My name is Sebastian. Today we'll be talking about unions and joins in Pyspark. And remember that the notebook can be found in the Data Science Simple repo. So let's get started. Alright, so we're gonna start by importing a bunch of Spark related machinery things. That's gonna take place here. Then, in this block of code, we are importing three functions. Those are custom functions that basically what they do is they create Spark tables. And we're going to talk about them in a second. So, let's look at this block of code here. Here we are creating three tables. We're going to call them players, new players, and ranking. And we're going to create them using the three functions that I mentioned above. So let's run this cell and see what we get. So I want you to notice that the first two tables, players and new players, are basically identical. They have the same set of columns, and you can tell that one might be the continuation of the other. So you have the column name with the name of the player, you have the column age, how old the player is, we have the column game, telling you what game are they playing, and then you have player ID. The third table, called ranking, only has player ID and ranking, and I want you to notice that player ID, it is also found in the other two tables. So we're going to use these three tables to make joins and unions. And also I want you to notice that these are small tables. This is because we're going to use them as examples. In real life, you'll have tables with hundreds of columns and millions of rows. That's where Pyspark is really useful. Alright, so let's go to our first example, an inner join. So, we're going to join the table players with the table ranking on the player ID key, and it's gonna be an inner join. So what's gonna happen is that Pyspark is going to create a new table with the columns name, age, game, player ID, and ranking. And in order to do so, it's going to use the table players and the table rankings. And it's going to keep only rows where the player ID is found in both tables. So it's going to keep these rows from players and these rows from ranking, while getting rid of this row from the table players and these two rows from the table ranking. So let's run this cell. Exactly what we wanted. A new table with the columns player ID, name, age, game, and ranking. And player ID keys go from 1 to 9. Now let's move to the left join example. So in this example, we're going to create a table called ranking players left. And the syntax to do so is very easy. So we have the table players and we're joining it with ranking. Again, we're gonna do it on player ID, but now we are telling Python to do a left join. So what's gonna happen is that our new table is going to have the columns name, age, game, player ID, and ranking. And because it's going to be a left join, we're going to retain all rows from the table players while getting rid of these two rows from the table ranking, because player ID 10 and 11 are not found in the table players. Alright, let's run this cell and let's see what we get. Exactly what we wanted. We have a table with the columns player ID, name, age, game, and ranking, and the values in player ID go from 1 through 9, and the last row is player ID equal to 15. And I want you to notice that in this row, the value for ranking is null. This is because in the table ranking, there was not a row for which we have player ID equal to 15. So automatically, Pyspark fills this value with a null value. Alright, now we're gonna move to the outer join example. In this case, all elements from both tables will be preserved. And the syntax is very similar. So we are creating a table called ranking players outer, and we're joining players with ranking, and we're doing it on the player ID, and we're telling Python that it's going to be an outer join. So let's take a look. I want you to notice three things. First, that under player IDs, we have all values found in the table players and the table rank. The second thing I want you to notice are these two rows. As you can see, we have values for player ID and ranking, but we have no values for name, age, and game. This is because in the table players, we do not have player ID 10 and 11. In a similar way, the last row has values for player ID, name, age, and game, but it has a null value for ranking. This is because in the table ranking, we do not have a player ID equal to 15. Alright, now let's move to the next example, which is left anti-join. So the syntax is going to be very similar. We're going to do a join between players and ranking on player ID, and then we say how equal to left anti. So what's going to happen is that we are only going to get rows that are found in the table players, but are not found in the table ranking. Therefore, the only row that we will get is this one right here. So let's take a look. Pretty cool, right? Now let's move to union tables. So let's say that you have two tables and one is the continuation of the other, and you want to put those two tables together, or you want to union them. So let's take a look at these lines of code that I have here. First thing that I have is calls equal to players.columns. What this is doing is saving under calls the name of the columns found in the players table. Then the union takes place here. So the new table is going to be called full players, and I'm doing players union with new players. It's important to notice that here I'm selecting the columns that I have saved before under the variable calls. It is important that the columns in both tables that we're unioning are in the same order. Finally, here I'm going to print the new table to screen. Exactly what we wanted. Now, let's say that you union your tables, but you have the wrong order in the columns. That's what I'm doing right here. Let's see what happened. As you can see, the union took place. It didn't give you an error, but clearly the table is not what you wanted. Under the column game, you have the name of the games, but also you have some numbers, while on the column player ID, you have numbers and also name of games. So watch out when you make unions, make sure that the columns are in the correct order. Alright guys, I hope you liked the video. Talk to you soon.